Hi ladies and gents, welcome to the second episode of NGMI Trades. My name is TJ. Let's get straight into it today. So, Bitcoin broke out of its accumulation, or if you want to call it that, I think it's probably the wrong term, but the chop channel is how I like to call it, the chop channel of the last 3 weeks. It's these two areas of support and resistance have obviously held up very well, and then over the weekend we had an explosive move out up to sort of 32.2k, which was the 200-day moving average, a swift rejection, and we now find ourselves back in this channel. Now, we predicted this in last week's episode. We predicted the explosive breakout due to macro factors, so we positioned ourselves accordingly. So we took an average entry of 29.5k. We were buying the highs of 30.3k, just underneath the 30.5 resistance level, and then we were buying all along here through the whole of last week. We caught a low of 28.8, but yeah, average entry 29.9k. We then had 3 exits beginning of this week, Monday, Tuesday. So a 20% exit at this resistance level, so 30.5k, 31.5k, and then 31.9k. They were our exit levels. I didn't think we would get to the 200-day moving average, which we did, and then, as we discussed, were swiftly rejected. Now, if you're still long, I want to make it clear that there definitely could be a lot more juice in the tank. The 48k sell-off has been brutal and aggressive, so a larger relief rally could well be in order. Also, as a long-term investor, rather than a trader, obviously these levels are attractive on a longer-term horizon. However, I do think it is worth bearing in mind that, in all likelihood, this is all it's going to be, a relief rally. So whether we kick on and make further gains, I still think we're coming lower in the short to mid term, so I think that's worth bearing in mind. As per last week's episode, I think inflation risk and interest rate risk has been priced in, lower growth has not, and that will be the capitulation leg where we see real pain and where real money can be made if positioned correctly. So, at the moment I'm risk off. However, there are 2 things that would change that quite quickly, and it is worth reiterating that this is the most difficult macro environment in years, so being agile and ready is vital. So yeah, two things would change it. DXY, discussed it in detail last week. Dollar strength index. Now, this is a 24-hour chart, so we had this explosive move higher yesterday, which is what caused this brutal sell-off in crypto. We'll go to the overlay chart, Bitcoin versus SPX. So here you see this is DXY in orange. You've got Bitcoin in candles. So DXY had this big move up. Bitcoin sold off from the 32,000-ish short-term highs down to 29.2 at one point. Now, as you can see, DXY is now coming off again, and Bitcoin is making a little bit of a recovery, 29.9 from the wick down to 29.2. But look, to be perfectly honest, we are now back in that channel, and I think approach with caution is the best advice. However, as I say, if we see DXY to continue this move lower, and what's really important is this ascending channel. So, as you can see here, DXY broke out, this big breakout here, as we discussed last week, to the 105 20-year peak was what caused the capitulation of stocks, caused the capitulation of Bitcoin down from 48k to where we find ourselves now. This little bounce off the ascending channel coincides with the bounce in equities and the small bounce we had in crypto. Now, what we wanted to see was this collapse into the ascending channel. That would have turbocharged equities. We would have seen a much larger bounce, but we haven't. We've seen a bounce off the channel itself, which, in all honesty, is not a great look for risk assets. So, for me, I am risk off until we see further clarification on where this goes. But I don't like this bounce, and it makes me think we might be going back to those 105 levels. So, 1, that's the worry. If it changes, I'll be putting risk back on. 2, obviously SPX, equities. So yeah, this is an SPX chart. SPX broke out of its descending channel, where, again, quite explosively, as DXY sold off. It gave SPX this boost. It broke out of the descending channel quite aggressively, and then we would have liked to see that continue, and it hasn't. DXY again has done what we didn't. It hasn't done what we wanted it to do. SPX has followed suit. It's sold off, and in all likelihood, there is a decent chance that SPX comes back down and retests this descending channel, and then we see what happens. Does it bounce? Does it collapse back in? If it collapses back in, then you can bet your bottom dollar that Bitcoin and crypto is going to bleed. So yeah, please bear that in mind. So guys, just a quick side note and something that is worth bearing in mind, keeping an eye on. So crude oil prices. This is the 5-year chart. Let's start with the 1 year. So the 1 year, it's been a pretty aggressive one-way trend higher. We look at the 6 months. That's been even more pronounced. So we've seen the bulk of the move. And then let's look at the 5-day. So we peaked at $120 a barrel on the 31st, which coincides with when Bitcoin hit 32.2, the 200-day moving average, beginning of this week, and then obviously moved lower. Equities also moved lower. Now, what we want to see is this trend break. We don't want to see crude back above $120 a barrel. We want to see a break in trend where the price of oil starts moving down gradually. We don't want super aggressive, but we want a gradual trend down in oil price. If we don't see that, then reevaluate your risk positions. Now, let's get onto it. Trading, Bitcoin. What are we looking to do? So, quite simply, Bitcoin can do one of 4 things here. We come up here and we test this channel. So, I mean, there's a high probability that happens. So yeah, up here, we then can either hit that channel and come back down, decide what to do next, or we shoot out. Option 2, we come down here and we test the bottom of the channel, hopefully bounce. Or option number 3, we go straight down and descend out of the channel altogether. So, in terms of risk, I have applied a tiny amount of risk. I mean, I put big position size on last week. I've taken all of that off. Now I put a fraction of that on here. I got it yesterday at, I think it was 29.6k. But yeah, a fraction. It really just to have a little bit of skin in the game. In all honesty, my gut is telling me that we probably take this route. So I will have bids at the bottom of this channel. Again, smaller size because unless the macro factors change, which we discussed, I think probability-wise, and that's all this is, I've been wrong many times in the past, I'll be wrong many times again in the future, but you make your bets based on probability. So, probability-wise, I think there is a greater chance of coming down towards the bottom of this channel, and we've tested it a lot, so this time, maybe breaking it. So that's where my head's at. I'll put a little bit of risk on, but it's a fraction of what I was playing with last week. So, that's Bitcoin. Now look, Ethereum. It is my favourite coin. I'm sure it's lots of your guys' favourite coin. It is something that you now need to have a long think about. The last year, Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, that has played very well along this trend line. That broke last week and it broke aggressively. So I took a position last week in Ethereum that did very well versus fiat. However, the Bitcoin valuation is a very different story. Now, after losing that key support level, I wanted to wait for the weekly to close to see if Ethereum made some sort of phoenix from the flames recovery. It didn't. So, probability-wise, I think this chart probably just moves lower. This valuation just moves lower. So, even if we do get a Bitcoin recovery and Bitcoin does well versus fiat, Ethereum will follow and it will do well versus fiat, but it will, in all likelihood, it's just probability again, and this is not financial advice, but just my opinion, in all likelihood, the valuation versus Bitcoin will bleed. So we will move lower down here, and your money would have been better spent invested in Bitcoin. So that is my focus. It always is my focus in times like this, i.e. distressed. And that goes for the wider crypto market in an even bigger sense. When market conditions are like this, as I say, distressed, I'd rather focus on Bitcoin. Anyway, short and sweet today, guys. Giveaway time. We had a number of entries for this handsome boy. Where is he? There he is. So number of entries. And if you don't win today, we'll be doing more in the coming months. But today's winner is JT Cryptosis. Congratulations, sir. Please DM me on Twitter with your wallet address, and I will wing this handsome chap over to you. Guys, thanks for listening. It's been fun. As always, I'll check back in with you next week.